So the lie began from the very beginning of time, right? And I can ask you one question right now. What does history tell us you about Africa? Who discovered Africa? If you write right now on Google who discovered Africa, you find out that is one white man that he came and discovered Africa. And you can ask yourself that how can you discover a place that already exists? How can you discover a place that people already live in that place? It is impossible, but that's what the history tells us. That's what people believe about Africa, that it was discovered by a white man. This guy, he came and then he went back, he gave a report, and then the next we know is colonialism, because those guys, they sat somewhere to divide Africa like a piece of cake because they discovered it, they own it, it belonged to them. But that is us. We discovered, we're the first people to know. And today you have a lot of people around the world that they think that Africa was discovered by them. First of all, I think every African should be doing what I do, like everybody, because of who we are, right? We're African, we should love Africa. You know, when I went to South Korea, I realized that Africa is being perceived and viewed very different. I realized that, well, the media, what I see on TV, what people talk about Africa, even my friends, they don't really know about it. It's very negative. It's very negative. That was 2013, and I was like, I must change this. So I started actually there in South Korea. I started to go to schools, to like elementary school, like kindergarten, elementary, middle school, high school. I started to go there. That was like my part-time job. I went to, like in Korea, I went to every single city in Korea. I went everywhere in that country, and I was going to these schools. One day I went even close to North Korea. Like there's this one place called Paju. It's just next to North Korea. Like you see North Korea is there, South Korea is here. I went there and I went to kindergarten. These little kids, and these little kids, when they see you, some of them, they start to cry. They just see you, they say, why are you crying? So I was like, why are you crying? So they're scared. These are little kids, but that's what they have been seeing on TV. That's what, like, sometimes some of them, even their parents teach them like that. What we're trying to do is we're trying to build a new system that is for Africans, it's for us, a new system that it will support us, it will challenge authorities here in Africa, right? And it will challenge as well, it will defend and protect the image and heritage of Africa, right, from outsiders, Westerners, Easterners, and to build pretty much a new system, because before colonialism we had a different system, right? During colonialism we had a different system. After that we're still struggling with this system, right? And our forefathers like Haile Selassie, Julius Kambarage Nyerere, Kwame Nkrumah, Kaunda, and so many others,
they tried to build a new system after colonialism that unite all Africans, right, to become one. And they did their part, right? And, you know, now they're gone. Nobody's here right now. So it's our responsibility right now as, you know, the sons of Africa to actually carry on with that move and that fight. And that's what One Africa is standing for. One Africa is not about me personally, but it's about us.
Hey everybody, how you guys doing, man? Thank you guys for joining me today. It's a pleasure to be here with you, and I really appreciate for your love and for your support and for just coming here. I know you might be having a lot of schedules and a lot of things to do, but I just really appreciate you guys for coming here and to have this conversation together. All right. First of all, I appreciate God for giving me this an opportunity to stand here before you. Man, it's just by His grace and mercy that we are alive. And you know, the Bible says His mercies are new every single morning. So every single morning there's deliverance of mercies. God is just delivering it to us. And you know, we have a limited time, guys, to be honest. We have a limited time. We don't have a lot of time to live in this world. You came here for a purpose, specific purpose, in a limited amount of time. So every single day as you pass, as you're living, you got to know that the clock is ticking. The clock is ticking, all right? So you got to do what you're called to do. You got to do your purpose. That is very important. I see my brother is already excited right there. You got to do what you're called to do, all right? My brother, I'm going to bring you in very soon. You got to do what you're called to do, man. The clock is ticking. So the more, let me just remove this. Yeah. You got to do what you're called to do because the clock is ticking every single day, man. You wake up every single day. You wake up. The time that you celebrate New Year, it's actually something to really ask yourself, like, what have I done in the previous year? Because every single day you wake up, the day is just gone. All right. And if you discover your purpose and who you're called to be, what you're called to do into this earth, then you got to do it as soon as possible because you don't know when your time is going to end. You know what I'm saying? So we are here doing our mission for this Africa, for beautiful continent of Africa. We'll be talking about Africa's unity and everything, all institutions that are there to help our society. And how can we do? How can we connect all this stuff? The matter of fact, the conversation will be very spontaneously, all right? It's just going to be very spontaneous. So I want you to back up your seat, you know, put your seat belt and sit right there. Wait for the storm that is about to come. All right, you guys are not ready for this. There's a huge storm is about to happen today, and I'm telling you, Africa will never be the same again because of the youth like me and you who is watching here today. We are the one that we're called to change this continent. We're the one that are called to change our countries, and this is the generation that we're going to transform everything that is there. Before I get started, let me just raise a word of prayer a little bit before bringing my brother here. This is our tradition here. We always pray before we begin, and we thank God after we end. God, I thank you for today, for giving us such an amazing opportunity to be here with my brother Gamma to talk about the continent we love, the country that you have blessed us with, Africa. And I'm wearing the t-shirt written Africa right here. Thank you so much. Be with us from the very beginning until the end. And through this session, I just pray that somebody will learn something. Somebody will be transformed, changed, and decolonized, so that God will just step outside there and transform this continent to come back to the originality, what you wanted it to become, what you always planned it to be. God, we thank you and I bless you in Jesus' name. Amen. My brother Gamma, welcome, my brother. It's really good to see you, man. You're actually you have to unmute yourself. You're muted.
Oh,
okay. Here we go. My brother,
it's 2023 and here we are still speaking with muted microphones. Can you believe it, brother?
Come on, man.
Thank you so much for inviting me, brother Chiva. I listen to a lot of your work and I follow your work. It is only by the grace of God that someone who shares exactly the same values as me stands for similar things that I stand for. One, this is Pan-Africanism. Two, this is kingdom culture. And, I'm super excited. A little bit about me. My name is Gamalihleli. Makobaya Kauleza.
Come on, go. You gotta go slow. You gotta go slowly, man. I have to be able to pronounce your name today. Can you say it again, man?
My name is Gamalihleli.
Gamalihleli.
Makobaya Kauleza.
Makobaya Kauleza.
Cuba.
Can you say that again?
Cuba. My friends then call me Cuba.
Ah, Cuba. Oh
Yes.
my God,
So,
man.
so precisely because I am, a continental citizen, but as well as a global citizen, right?
Yes.
I believe in kingdom culture. So my friends call me Gama Cuba, and so
Wow.
because it's so difficult, I'm Xhosa and
Yeah.
Xhosa. So
Awesome.
I'm
Yeah.
born in the Eastern Cape, literally 5 kilometers from where Nelson Mandela was born. The Eastern Cape is
Wow.
the
Wow.
province
Come
of
on, man.
great people. A vast
Come on now.
majority of all the liberationists and the presidents of the now ruling party actually came from
Yeah.
the Eastern Cape,
Wow.
and so I'm fortunate enough to have come from
Yeah.
such an environment, but
Yeah.
mostly, I come from a very Christocentric home, but
Yeah.
Christian, but
Mm.
also very African,
Mm. Yeah.
and so
Mm.
that's me. And I'm an entrepreneur, an
Yeah.
activist.
Yeah.
But my prime calling, I am, a child of
Yeah.
God. I am an
Yeah.
evangelist.
Yeah.
I believe God, has called us
Mm.
during this season for great things. And that's just me a little
Yeah.
bit.
Yeah. Man, I don't know what to say, man. I love the fact that you said we are building the same thing. We are in the kingdom. You cannot believe it. Just today, I started something very spiritual because I've been doing this mission for 4 years. But today, me and one of my friends were just hanging out at my place, and then we decided to start something, the new podcast. This is just basically listen the name of the podcast. The name of the podcast is Kingdom Podcast. We only talk about the kingdom of God. We only
That's
talk about
amazing.
the light of God.
That's
And it's
amazing.
amazing that you say that because that's the reason why we're here. Like we were basically sent here. We're coming from somewhere, all right?
Yep.
You know,
Yep. Yep.
we coming from somewhere and we were sent here for a specific purpose to do
Yep.
something. We're called to cultivate
Yep.
this world. We're called to
Yep.
cultivate this health. We're called to leave this health the better place than what we have found. When we came here,
Yep.
the matter of fact, when we came here, this was a better place. We're the one that
Yep.
destroyed it, but still, God, by His grace, He's giving us an opportunity to actually make it better. Because today we start thinking about going to live in the Mars, but God gave us this world. It was perfect. He had everything that
100%.
it needed. And it's just
100%.
so when it comes to our passion about Africa, man, this continent called Africa, it is the blessing, it is the gift from God that has given us, and we have all the responsibility to make sure that we change things in Africa, and we can do so.
100%. Look, I think one, as spontaneous as the conversation is,
Yeah.
intentionally we've guided it, to say with you, we agree that, let's look at, for example, the institutions that develop communities and nations,
Yeah.
and so, I follow a lot of your work. And by the way, I see the other time you met the Eastern president who had come to Tanzania, and I see the great work you are doing in the political landscape,
Yeah.
in the civic movement. And I'm super inspired. And here's another thing that's common about you and I. I'm also an acoustic guitarist.
Nah, come on, man. Get out of here, man. Come on, man. You're
I'm
messing with
telling
my
you,
dreams.
brother. I'm
Come
not
on,
at all.
man.
I'm an acoustic guitarist. And so, I think you and
Yeah.
I've never met you, but I've never seen,
Yeah.
such generational commonalities, and,
Mm.
intentionally, I think, with the conversation really is to
Yeah.
say, how is it that someone can be born in a different country,
Yeah.
with a different culture, and all of a sudden they have such common things and such common
Mm.
interests. Your heart continues to cry for a united Africa, a kingdom founded Africa,
Yes.
but all
Mm.
at the same time, interested around influencing institutions of power, that determine the lives of millions or billions of people in the continent of Africa. I
Yeah.
like
Come on.
something you normally say. You normally say Africa is 55 countries, that is the 55th country is the diaspora all over the world. The
Exactly.
African
Yeah.
people, we are the only people all over the
Mm.
world who are scattered everywhere. You have
Yes.
Africans
Yeah.
everywhere in Asia, But as well as, as much as we're everywhere in the world, we're also the only people who everywhere we are not so much as thriving and as successful. And
Yeah.
there's so
Yeah.
much disrespect based on the color of our skin, based on our history. And there's many groups who are trying to associate with many other interest groups, trying to say we are the Hebrews, we are the Egyptians, the following
Yeah.
thing will be the Martians, But I think we have an independent identity. We
Exactly.
are African. And I think,
Yeah.
we're African. And I think because we are a generation that has been born
Yes.
after, several defeats that come from
Yeah.
several betrayals, a lot of people disassociate with the notion of being African because being
Yeah. Yeah.
African, is associated with losing. I love something that was said by another politician in South Africa by the name of
Come on
Julius
now.
Malema. He says,
Yeah.
to love an African means to love that which is politically and economically defeated. And so he says to love a black person is a revolutionary
Wow.
act
Wow.
because you now have to love someone that's defeated. And I think as
Wow.
this generation, whether colonialism was, a betrayal or whether it was a tactical, global move against us, we must come to the grips of accepting that we had, the former generations before us have had our losses. Maybe we accept that we may not move on, but we will move forward. And moving on, really, because all of a sudden we have the whole world telling us, no, you must move on. But I think
Yeah.
sometimes maybe moving forward is not moving on. And, the
Yes.
notion and the ministry of reconciliation is so important for United Africa. Once we accept where we are, heading towards it will give us the grips for us to head towards where we are supposed to be, right? Where we want to go. And I think, this conversation starts now to say institutionally, has Africa accepted that it came through wounds and is gone through wounds? And institutionally, can we then, as institutions, whether it's religious or it's political or it's socio-economic, whether it's, trade and industry, as Africans, have we healed? And then now that we've healed, can we move forward to say, can we build a new Africa? And from a position of having been in corporate, I've learned that 10% you must spend it on finding out what the problem is, and 90% trying to bring the solution. And so
Come
once
on,
we
man.
accept
I
that
love
we've gone
that.
through something, then we start going forward. So I think, for me, that's why I'm in this conversation, to say institutionally, can we envisage and imagine a new Africa, a forward-looking Africa? How does that look like, And of course, you put something, you say one passport, and that's one step in the right direction. And I want to add, and I say one university, one
Come on.
military,
Come
one
on now.
bank, one medical institution, one political party. I'm thinking out loud here, but
Yeah.
I don't know
Yeah.
what
Yeah.
do you think
Exactly.
about this, brother?
Exactly. Absolutely, man. I agree with you 1000%. Because me and you, we had this conversation before. You remember that conversation, and we've been
Yeah.
texting here and there. Man, like everything you're saying, it's fascinating. Because I mean, as you say, we're very similar. So I I see myself agreeing with you with everything you say. You know what I'm saying? Because that is the generation right now. My hope and prayer is that our governments and people who are in the authority to recognize this, that youth are actually already waking up and they want to see change. And they don't just want to see change, but they want to be part of the change. They want to bring that change. They want to transform this continent because we are concerned about our future. We're concerned about the next generation because they're going to be here for as long as they take. The Africa's population, more than 60% are youth, like me and you, and we're gonna be here for as long as it takes. And how can we secure that future for the next generation? Because where we are today, my brother, believe me, the life we're living today is the preparation of the life we're going to live tomorrow. Where we are
100%.
today is the preparation and the sacrifice that Mandela did long time ago, Nyerere did long time ago, Nkuruma did long time ago, and today we're living. We are surviving because of their sacrifice. And these are just one figures. We're talking about all the days, like the founding fathers of our nations. But today we have an opportunity to come together, all of us, and prepare, secure the future for the entire generation, for our continent. If one person did that in our countries, how is it going to take if all of us Africans come together and do something for this continent, secure future for our kids? And that
I
begins.
definitely agree with you.
Yeah. And that, how does that look like? Because somebody can ask me, okay, we want change, but how does that look like? Man, brother, it's just like what you're doing. It's just like what I'm doing. Entrepreneurship, innovation, and try to enhance yourself as much as you can with knowledge, because knowledge is power. The Bible says,
Yep.
without knowledge, my people are perish. My people are perish because of lack of knowledge. They don't perish
Yep.
because they don't have money. They don't perish because they don't have resources. In Africa, if everything you can name it, we have it. But why are we perishing? Because of knowledge. And the word knowledge, in Hebrew language, it means light. That means my people are perished because of lack of light. They don't have light.
100%.
They don't have that enlightenment in them. And we gotta seek knowledge as much as we can, because that's how we're going to deliver our continent. We gotta
100%.
take away all this. When you enrich yourself with knowledge, that means you're getting rid of ignorance. And the
Yep.
funny thing is, the word ignorance, that is in Hebrew meaning, but in English is darkness. Like the word darkness in Hebrew is ignorance. So that means
Yeah.
when you
Yeah.
don't
Yeah.
have knowledge, you have this darkness in you, and which is ignorance. And
Yeah. Yeah.
so this is something that we have to do. Yes, brother, you can go ahead.
And you know, brother Mika,
Yeah.
I think what you are touching on is the question of generational momentum. You
Yes.
know, uh,
Yes.
we must start looking at intergenerational development. A lot of people are
Absolutely.
always, a lot of international investors that I bump into here in South Africa, they always
Yeah.
complain. Africa has problems with leadership, and I hear people all over, saying, the problem of Africa is leadership. And I want to submit something, brother, and I say,
Yeah.
we complain about horrible leadership, but the leadership development sector is the
Yeah.
most under-resourced sector in the global sphere, particularly in Africa. And particularly one of the reasons why we have hijackable leaders, right? And we have leaders that have a price on their head, is because from an Afrocentric point of view, we have philosophy to understand what Africanism is, to understand what Pan-Africanism is, to understand what Black consciousness is. But
Oh yeah.
from a development point of view, we don't have actually developmental philosophy.
Yeah.
Developmental philosophy that actually undergirds and continues to develop one. What does it mean to be a leader in an
Yeah.
African context? And so what you have a lot of vocal individuals, a lot of
Yeah.
intelligent young people like you and I, who are inspirational, highly motivated, full of life. But then
Yeah.
what you find out from us is that, there isn't cultivated generational momentum. There isn't cultivated intergenerational thinking. Let's look at, for example, the East. You've been in the East in countries like South Korea. You've thrived there at an international level when you were in South Korea. You were almost lucky to meet Kim Jong-un. You should have met that guy.
That's- that guy is from North Korea, Yeah, I almost
So
saw him. Yeah.
If you look at the East and you look at its generational momentum, the oldest hotels and the oldest companies in the world are in Japan, are in Asia.
Yeah.
Japan has hotels that are close to 3,000 years, that this has been in the legacy of the family, right? And so I think, from an institutional level, we
Yeah.
haven't developed leadership development institutionally, but part of the problem as well, because colonialism was not independent of faith communities. The same way as nation building will not be independent of faith communities, right?
Absolutely.
So,
Absolutely.
and continental building will not be independent of faith communities. So ultimately, the fabric of the African society, its generational thinking, intergenerational thinking was deconstructed from a
Come on.
religio point of view, right?
Yeah.
And so what you find out is that colonialism was about, I always say wrong information is Western ignorance.
Yeah.
So all of a
Yeah.
sudden, what you want to create in a community, you want to
Yeah.
create, the castigation or the rejection of generational thinking. So what you have now, you have many young men like you and me, and our predecessors, who are fighting for something for us to have, but in terms of actually being institutionally developed into saying that what we've started now, we got to leave someone next to it.
Yeah.
We got to leave someone beyond it. So with people who were hyped up, there was so much, intrinsically motivated about getting something done for them now. But few of us were there who will say, for example, we're willing to die so that this can get to the next generation. And I
Yeah.
think part of the problem of Africa is that, one, we lack proper leadership development. Secondly, I think we lack proper intergenerational thinking skills. Thirdly,
Yeah.
I think there's an aspect of one institution that we must look and be critical about, faith communities, how they have played a fundamental role in deconstructing intergenerational thinking. Because all
Yeah.
of us as Africans, we kind of having, this eschatological view of Africa, that the gold and the silver and the platinum that's here in Africa, we're going to taste it in heaven. Whereas, the Asians, the Europeans, and the rest of the world, they're tasting it here in planet Earth. So there's something there that we must challenge, and we must have, some sort of interactive theology, because we have passive theology, that says we'll do it in heaven. And then we see people driving Lamborghinis, coming from the UAE. We see people, owning massive buildings coming from the East. This is Asia. And, people in Europe, they are making it. They use our cobalt. They use our nickel. They use our gold. They use our platinum. And all of us, we are here hoping that when we die in Kosa, there's a song that even says, it's so passive. It says, no man di coca. This religious song, rooted in the institution of Christianity, says, even if I wear rags, the passive theology allows passive interaction with our material realities. And this was intentional because the Christian faith gives us both. And I speak as a Christian, and I understand that, we must be critical of these institutions and ask ourselves, in the development of our leadership, what are the things that we must unlearn as we now become teachers? How can we be responsible about our thinking? Because all of a sudden now people are saying now God is unfair, God has favorites. He's favoring Europe more than us. We're asking for the daily bread. He's given them a whole baker. He's only giving us crumbs. That's a topic of another day, brother.
Man, I wanna come to your church, man. I wanna come to man. Listen, man. There's one thing you said a lot of things, but there's one thing that I want to highlight, that there is a need for us to unlearn some things, because we have to unlearn something, just like what you said, because I think there's this way of thinking that is very passive and not active. And so it causes us to be very like ignorant. We already spoken about that. And also to be like passive and to be spectator, but not being a doer of what we should believe in. Because faith is not just about, believing, but also it's about doing what you believe, right? I believe that, rain is going to come. So I'm going to go out, I'm going to hold my umbrella and then go outside with the umbrella, even if it's not raining. I'm doing something. It's active. It's not something that is passive. But the ideology that is out there right now that most of us we think of, it's not really about action. It's not really about doing something to see something happen, to see a result. And so you find out there's a lot of people sitting out there and I'll be like, you know what, this God thing is what brought us colonialism in Africa. Don't even try to mention that I lost a lot of people. Even right now, I'll say this, like, I'm losing a lot of people simply because I speak about God. I pray before the session, I pray after the session, and I always speak about that. So this is what brought colonialism in Africa. And then I tell them all the time that, man, my brothers and sisters, you can hate the messengers, but don't hate the message, because the truth is the truth. It will always be there. So if me, the messenger, I am corrupted, it doesn't mean that what I'm bringing to you, the message I'm bringing to you, is corrupted as well. It's just me. I need to change. I need to be transformed. But the message, it will stay right there. True that God is alive and he wants us to be active and not passive. He wants us to 100%. Prosper and not to be armed. He has a better plan for a future and a hope and not to harm us. That's what he wants for us. And until the time we wake up and realize that in unity there's a power. I always use this one scripture in the Tower of Babel. When God is said that, he looked at those guys and was like, if I'm going to leave these guys continue to do what they do because they have one heart, he said this, nothing will be impossible to them. So it's like, okay, let us go down and interrupt their language. So he came down and that was the beginning of different languages we have. So if God, he knows that if you have a united group of people, nothing they decide to do, it will be impossible. If he knows that, who are we not to accept that Africa, we should be united today to see the change in Africa, to protect our resources, to protect our women and children and men who are dying every single day. Instead to spend a lot of money in the budget of wars that we're killing each other every single day, we'll spend it in developing our countries for the next generation.
Look, I 100% back this view. And I 100% back this view, and I think what my criticism on the overall spectrum of what let's say interfaith dialogue has brought into Africa is passive thinking, and with our I'm an advisor and a venture partner, for international venture capital firm investing into African ventures. And what we find out when we do research, we ask our own people, when you don't have customers, what do? They say they pray. And so I think again, as much as prayer becomes a core source, we must create interactive dialogue, with our, spirituality. And I think, truly the world is safe behind faith. Why do I submit? And I'm an ardent believer that faith communities, nation building is not independent of faith communities. And I think faith communities, from a kingdom point of view, express the united heart of God for the world, and that the world should live in peace, and that the world should prosper. And I think, but at a socio-political level, the theology plays a fundamental role that deconstructs the unity that we want. And I think, Pan-Africanism should be about, irrespective of our religion, irrespective of our background, irrespective of our social class, we probably must have a common ground. And, first, the common ground is to say we are, historically marginalized. Secondly, God stands with the poor, and so therefore I genuinely believe that God does not raise leaders above Muslims, does not raise leaders above Jews, does not raise leaders above Christians, does not raise leaders above African traditional spirituality practitioners or Buddhists. He raises them among people. And I think, but we can apply Christian values of honesty, of, unity, of forgiveness, of reconciliation, to guide and govern the world. But I also think that, we are in the right direction when we say faith communities then encompass the notion that will give us desire to bring about unity. Because people need a preliminary idea to unite on. We cannot unite without an idea. Now let's say to people, you cannot govern people whose philosophies you don't understand, whose superstitions you don't understand, whose aspirations you don't understand. And so faith communities then are responsible for that aspect of society. And I think, however, we ought to responsibly interact with society from a faith community point of view. And, I hope one day you'll be the president of Tanzania when I'm the president of South Africa.
I'll be president of Africa, my brother. You'll be reporting to me.
So I'm coming for a report, Mr. President. So I think, one of the most important things, as we continue to develop a united Africa, we want to continue to establish a foundation. And, Africa is the population of the present and the population of the future. The stats are telling us that we'll be above a billion people in the next few years. And so anyone who banks against Africa, banks against their future. Banks against the biggest consumer market in the world. Banks against the biggest human resource in the world, right? And so we are the future, whether the world likes it or not, right? So I think, but at an institutional level, and I love that the first institution that we deal with now is, the institution of faith and religion, because we're a super religious continent, and it cannot be broken. Let me give you a background here in the Eastern Cape in South Africa. The frontier wars, there's something called the frontier wars. When the English and the Boers could not break into the Xhosa kingdom, they use faith because we are people of faith. So the missionaries came. There were 4 frontier wars, and they could not win the frontier wars against Nika. And they beheaded a number of our kings. But now, because they could not break in, they came in through a missionary strategy. And the first chiefs, including my great-grandfather, they were the first missionary, they were the first converts, and they were the first teachers, my grandfather, And so I come from a family that was affected by things like these. And so it was from the Christocentric point of view that the fabric of the society was deconstructed. And so once we're able to reconstruct African thinking, contextualize active believing, we can be able to believe, and continue to build an Africa we want, But also, I would love to say, where now the faith becomes necessary. This is what differentiates human from human. Is where we say we have a colonial and a painful past. We may not move on, but we will move forward. That's where the
Yes.
faith comes in. The
Oh,
faith
now.
is the ability to
Oh, now.
reconcile and say,
Yeah.
no matter what has happened in the past, like for
Yeah.
example, in South Africa, the faith allows us to
Mm.
coexist with white South Africans. In
Mm.
South Africa, we're 5 generations. The
Mm.
great grandchildren of our
Mm.
colonial masters, of our
Mm.
abusers, of our
Mm.
genital mutilators, and our
Mm.
great ancestors, rapists, and
Mm.
they are still here. But what
Oh.
does the faith does? What the
Mm.
faith does, it creates the honest opinion to interact with hurt
Oh.
and pain. So
Mm.
without the faith, the
Mm.
country would be in a constant state of anarchy. But the
Mm.
country is able to tolerate because it is accepted the
Yeah.
notion of indigenized form of
Mm.
Christianity. And this is
Mm.
to say, Christianity that is based on our own roots of Isintu.
Mm. Mm. Mm.
There's Isintu, then there's Ubuntu. Isintu is
Mm.
the overarching, the Ubuntu
Mm.
is, just the functionality, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
we interact with society by saying, but irrespective of the past, these are human beings. And what
Mm.
does it mean when you are a practitioner of Isintu to say
Mm.
the other is a human being? This means they
Mm.
are broken, they have
Mm.
mistakes, they
Mm.
bleed. And so
Mm.
in South Africa, we're able to live not because of Nelson Mandela. Nelson Mandela did not save anybody. There are
Yeah.
prisoners who were in prison longer than him, and they are
Mm.
not as famous as he is. But he
Mm.
became an important icon,
Mm.
recognition of his status,
Mm.
but he became
Mm.
an important icon. But South
Mm.
Africa is at peace because many South Africans today,
Mm.
many
Mm.
South Africans today, they
Mm.
they subscribe to the notions of Isintu. They
Yeah.
practice the notion of Isintu to say,
Mm.
irrespective of our past, we
Mm.
reconcile and we understand
Come
that
on
we
now.
should move forward. But
Yes.
however, South Africa is the youngest country in Africa. It's not easy, brother, moving forward because
Yeah.
it's the most unequal country in Africa.
Yeah.
We are living opposite the wealthiest of the wealthiest in the world. The Gini coefficient was
Yeah.
65.3 in
Yeah.
2016 in Stellenbosch, where I stayed.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
know people who are living under 100 rands a week,
Mm.
and so the
Mm.
inequality is high. But because we're
Yeah.
human beings, we keep living. And so now this takes me to the question of, from an institutional level, can we then maybe redefine? I'm not pushing chances here because being
Yeah.
African is being black, right?
Yeah.
But can
Yeah.
we now redefine and say others can be African by choice? Can your
Mm.
friends from South Korea, where you
Mm.
lived, and
Mm.
people were afraid of you because they are not used to black people? My friends from
Mm.
South Korea, when they met me in Stellenbosch, they said,
Mm.
their kids said, I was a madman, like mad, so their
You're
language for
kind of
black
mad
is like
right now,
Swahili.
man. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. You're
And
kind
so
of mad
and
right
so
now.
and so
Uh-huh.
and so and so what you then find out, Brother Chiva, is that then
Yeah.
faith then sets the precedence. But then I want
Yeah.
to push it a little bit and say then faith maybe says, because of our innate humanity, because faith says we are not our body, we live in the spirit. And so then we
Yeah.
say whatever happened in the bodies, but we are
Mm.
human beings inside. How can we reconnect and reconcile? Then
Yeah.
the fundamental question then is to ask, can your friends in South Korea who want to live in Tanzania, who
Mm.
want to behave and
Mm.
accept and adopt the cultures and the traditions and the customs of the
Yeah.
Tanzanian people in a Christian way, brother, can
Mm.
those people be called
Mm.
Tanzanians?
Mm. Mm.
And if they are children's children who are
Mm.
still Asian, but they were
Mm.
born in Tanzania, speaking the
Mm.
language of the
Yeah.
Tanzanians,
Mm.
who are pushing the agenda of Tanzania,
Mm.
can those people be
Mm.
accepted to be Africans? And so this is the fundamental question that I think the Christian faith is able
Yeah.
to answer. In a
Mm.
difficult, black conscious, black oppressed South Africa,
Mm.
that there are allies, but we cannot undermine the struggle for black people because of few white
Mm.
allies and say all of
Mm.
a sudden racism does not exist. There are
Mm.
allies. And
Mm.
so
Mm.
this gives us the question then to say maybe
Yeah.
Africanness has to also be innovated. Maybe we ought to innovate
Mm.
customs.
Mm.
Maybe this is
Mm.
what the Christian faith gives us, to
Mm.
define humanity beyond our skin tone, to define
Mm.
humanity beyond our oppression, to define
Mm.
humanity beyond our
I love
marginalization, to define
it.
humanity beyond our hate. This is a difficult thing because Europe is galloping in our riches, right?
Yeah.
And the rest
Yeah.
of Asia is galloping.
Mm.
But what about those who are saying, an aspect
Mm.
of these, riches, we need them to be in Africa. We need to
Mm.
invest in Africa. We are
Mm.
African by choice. They are
Mm.
not African by chance, but they are
Mm.
African by choice, So, yes,
Listen,
African youth must wake up now, and it's time for the youth to take an initiative.
my brother, man, I love you, man. Let me just say that before I continue, man. You said something really that um I've been talking about this for a couple times. Ethiopia. Ethiopia, the country that I love, is dear to my heart, right? A lot of people knows that, and it's everywhere. I love this country. There's something about this country that, I'm gonna take this context a little bit in this side, because I would really love for us to talk a little bit about Ethiopia, as two brothers who are, because we're one Africa, so we're Ethiopians as well, but we were not born
We are
there. Right?
Ethiopians.
Hey, you is Ethiopian, man. Yeah. So, so I want to talk about a little bit about this, because this country, man, is in my heart, and you know, it's God just put something in me about this country, 3 years ago, and I can't shake it off. Whether I talk about it or I'm not talking about it, but I always, think about this place, and pray as well. You say something in South Africa. You say the reason why right now you're able, even though it's still not equal, it's not fair, but you're able to live with people who oppressed, people who you see, they remind you of history. Like every single day you wake up in South Africa, you remember the history, because you see the product of ancestors who did something back in the past, but you are able to live that, because you're looking far beyond oppressions and everything that has happened, and you are able to it's a process still to reconcile of what has happened in the past, and still it's a process every single day, still working on it every single day to make sure that nothing like that ever happen again, or us as Africans become really angry and start what is that, revenge, revenge,
Yeah,
doing what they did in the past. So when I look the country Ethiopia, the country I really love, the country that has a very complicated history, beautiful history, but very complicated in the matter of so many tragedies that have happened in the past, that until today yet it's not yet reconciled, and that's what is bringing again and again Ethiopia backward and not really forward. Today I was here with my friend, and I was sharing a lot of videos. When I was in Ethiopia, I was sharing, and this guy was surprised, because I realized the reason why I started to do that, because a lot of people don't know about this country. They only know about wars and things that are happening. But when I was showing these videos to him, I was like, hey, this is the Ethiopia. This guy, he was overwhelmed. This guy, he was surprised. It's like, is this Ethiopia? And this is how it is? And this is how people are? And this, he was surprised, because the media and everything is just full of so many negativity that is happening there. But the message that I want us to pass across to this generation is that, unless, which I always say it multiple times, but I will say it again until the day I leave this world, that unless we agree to leave the past behind,
yeah.
and for that, let me read just this. I tweeted this just a couple days ago, and I want to read for this before I give you a chance as well to play Jane about this. I tweeted this a couple days ago specifically for that, just out of nowhere. I was like, okay, I'm gonna write this. Let me see, where is that? It's somewhere here. Somewhere here. Just for a second. Just give me a second. It's somewhere
No problem, brother.
there. Where is that? Okay, here. The future, I say this, the future of Ethiopia is bigger and brighter than the past, but you must be willing to leave the past to make a way for the future. The future of Ethiopia is brighter, but we must be willing to leave the past, to put away the past, so that we can make a way for the future, because you cannot really have a bright future if you're still thinking about the dark past you had. All right. So it's a time basically to bring each other together, to bring Africans together, to leave what has happened before, to reconcile. It's hard, it's bad. Maybe we might not be able to let it go of that, but for the sake of bright future that we want, for the sake of Africa we want, Ethiopia we want, South Africa we want, Tanzania we want, we must be able to find a way to reconcile the past and to move forward, to be like, you know what, we have the same goal. We want the better for Africa, want the better for our country. So why don't we move forward, past
Yeah,
everything and move forward, figure out how are we going to survive.
yeah. And look, I think my dear brother, and
Yeah.
this is the crux then that I say the value of faith
Mm,
communities plays
mm,
in nation building and
mm,
ultimately into the development of the continent, right? And I want to submit that we may not necessarily move on, but we may have to move forward.
Come on now.
And
I love this.
psychologically, trauma has an ability to withhold one's full potential. And so we're dealing with intergenerational trauma. And, unfortunately, no one is going to deal with it unless we pick it up ourselves. And, and I always say then, it is all left for South Africans, young South Africans. South Africa is a super polarized community. And, and I always say when I speak to my acquaintances, I say to them, colleagues, as young South Africans, we have to try to move forward. But as well as maybe we have to come to grips to asking the fundamental questions of redefining what it means to be South African, what it means to be African, and, in the broader sense, And, fundamentally, Brother Chiva, I think it is also our responsibility as people of color. Steve Biko said something. He says Europe gave to the world industrialization. Asia gave technological advancement. You can add what America added. I don't know what America added, but he says something. He says something that's so controversial. He says, but Africa is still yet. He says the greatest contribution is still yet to come from Africa, and Africa is to give the world a human face. And I want to say, brother, it is really our responsibility to humanize whiteness. We have a responsibility as Black brothers, as Africans, to approach Europe with our humanity, to approach Europe with our utmost authenticity and not conform, and continue to say Europeans are human beings. Their past was out of human brokenness, but their present cannot be determined by their past. But as well as come to grips with ourselves, that we have accepted the past and the humiliation that comes with the shared human past of being Black and white, but we will then make it our responsibility to share our human African values with the world. That is Europe. And I think this is an underrated perspective that says Black people have the responsibility of poor people, because in majority, poverty has a face, on media, as you had said, and it's Black. We have a responsibility to teach the wealthy, to teach, white, to teach angry, to teach oppressors, to teach the oppressed how to live in a more humane way. And and I think we ought to become vulnerable as well, to be willing to say, there has been a past, it has hurt us, but we're looking at moving forward. And how does this play a role today, in affecting our politics? And so you find politicians who are ultra angry with Europe and would wish to annihilate Europeans from the world. Brother, Europeans are here. They're still going to be here. We are stuck with them. Even if we draw borders across Africa, the rest of the world would starve. But, that's not the point, but we are still stuck with Europeans. We are stuck with them. They are our brothers. They are our business partners. They are our colleagues. They are our acquaintances, and there's always going to be, harder relationships. And, we have to make it our point to, get into the room and break the ice, and have the difficult discussions with them and hear what the other things, until there is no other. And for me, I make it my responsibility to, humanize whiteness, normalize whiteness in South Africa, when one of my core values is to, is to humanize whiteness. This is one of my core work. I bring white folks to poor places, to dangerous places, so that, being poor is not Black, but being poor is human. So that being rich is not white, being rich is being human. When, in South Africa, I always correct it. When Black South Africans meet a white person, immediately they think a boss. I get angry when I see this. And I say to them, when you meet a white person, you meet a colleague, you meet a fellow human being, they are not rich because they are white. But of course, this stereotype is again part of the problem, because in South Africa it was developed out of the educational system. I mean, an old 60-year-old would be forced to call a 10-year-old klein bas in Afrikaans, which is small boss. You can't call this small kid John. You can't call this small kid Freaky. You have to call this small kid klein bas. And so you would see 12-year-olds disrespecting elders. But I think, there are other, white South Africans who see this, and they've already now, because of the generational issues, they are now rewriting the story by saying, how can we do it the right way? Look, for example, our history in South Africa, our liberationists. We had the Helen Suzmans. Even a controversial figure today in South African politics, like Helen Zille. She stood up for things like, South African liberation. She was against imperialism, and so, the Neil de Beers switched side from being with the National Party to joining the ANC, and Umkondo Wisizwe bombing 50, Afrikaner homes a day, and so, not because he was against being Afrikaner, but because he was against oppression. And so I want to say, liberation was not black, but it was majority black, and I want to put, a very hard topic here. And I know a lot of my Pan-African brothers, they'll shoot me, because I'm living in a narrative and in a context of South Africa. Yeah, I know they're going to push back, but I'm living in a context of South Africa where we have about close to 8 million, 9 million white South Africans who are part of the narrative, and a small number of them is trying. And, and I say this because we draw the conversation from a Christocentric point of view, like Abraham, like God and Abraham. And, when Abraham is thinking about his nephew, Jonah, saying, even if there are 50 people, will you destroy the whole city? God would have saved it even if there were 10. And so I think, the Africa is still in a position of dialogue, not in dialogue at a, geopolitical level, but at a continental level. Before we talk about our relationship with Europe, let's first talk about our relationship with whites who are here. We have whites, they are here, guys. This is the elephant in the room. They are not going anywhere. We are stuck with them. We have to start now Africanizing those whites, and continuously sharing indigenous thinking and sharing our values, and let them speak Swahili, and, make it mandatory to speak isiXhosa. Most of my friends who are Germans, they speak, isiXhosa. They come here, learn isiXhosa, and ndiyathetha kancinci. I'll be laughing, But I think, of course, this is not white sympathy, but this is human realism. Because I know a lot of my colleagues will mistake this for white sympathy, and apartheid apologia. This is not what that is, but this is realism.
Yeah.
But I want to hear your view. I stretched this conversation to the extreme point because I want to hear your view.
No, the question is this. I want to ask you about that, because what you're saying, I agree with you 100%. But the problem, it comes when you are the one that always is humanizing them, but they ain't humanize you. When they see you, they see something else. They see like a stepping stone, someone that I can step on and do something. And we've seen that in our history, and we've seen that again and again and again. You can talk about the first guy who came here, Vasco da Gama. Probably when he came to do research, he was invited by our forefathers, and they cooked some good, like, nice ugali. If it was in Tanzania, South Africa,
I gotta eat ugali when I come there.
Exactly. Or if it was in Nigeria, they made some fufu for this Vasco da Gama and his family. They welcome him and all the stuff that the old man welcome. This is a white human being just came here to Africa for the first time, all those stuff. But then we know that was led to colonialism later on, and until today we know what has happened in the past. So most of us Africans, we have that consciousness in our mind, and we have that, I would say, I'll use this word. Okay, I don't like using this word, but I'll say we have that resistance in our hearts, that when you look at that, it reminds you of everything that has happened in the past, and you cannot get yourself to trust them again. Like, okay, I'm looking at you, you look like a nice guy, but man, the first guy I trust, you came with the Bible, and I trust you, and this is what has happened. This is reality of what has happened. So today, we're in this society where we are reconciling, and you guys are leaving, and we have a lot of them also. They came here, and mind you, most of them, they came here to take everything that is here. And when you go to Niger, there, the 40% of electricity in France is coming from Niger uranium, right? But when you go to Niger, more than 86%, they don't have electricity. It's the same case to so many other countries when you go here in Africa, right? So that ideology, you say, okay, we already got rid of colonialism, but now we have neo-colonialism, we have
Yep.
economic colonialism, and that's what is happening again and again and again. So how can I look at this person that I can't trust? Because you can love somebody. I am commanded to love you, but I have a choice to trust you. You know what I'm saying? So
100%.
yeah, I can do that, but but how can I look at you as a human being while you're not looking at me as a human being? Because I feel like you're slapping here, you're slapping then, I'm like slap here as well, and here again, and here again, and then there's no responsibility on your side. This equation, it become balanced when I look at you as a human being, and also you
Yep.
humanize me. But when you look at me like I'm a monkey, that I'm just somebody that you can take advantage of, and not really humanizing me as a human being, that equation is not balanced. How can you respond to that?
Look, it's 100%. And I was even a bit earlier, I was alluding to it, sharing that, I know that my African brothers will call this white sympathy, first of all, and secondly, colonialism apologetic. I think, one, we must come to grips that moving forward may not be moving on. Two, we must be critical of the institutional development of our leadership, that is Christian pacifism, because all of a sudden, we have people who are telling us, move on. Jesus said, forgive. Forgiveness is not taken, it's given.
Yeah,
And it does
yeah,
not
yeah.
come, on, it does not come at the account of the oppressor. You can't tell me how to forgive you, when to
Yeah.
forgive you, but I think psychologically first we need to come to grips as young people. We need to move on. We need to move forward. Sorry, even if we don't move on, but we need to move. We need to just move forward, right? And just continue with our lives, and just continue with our people, right? But secondly, I think we need to be realistic. From a socio-political point of view, social harmony. We need to ask ourselves, if it is tolerance, how do we then build a South Africa, that accommodates all aspects of the country? The country is knitted on blood, but its future, should it be knitted on tears or on sweat? You know, you know. And so I want to think that, ultimately, the trust factor is gonna be on both sides. It's gonna first be the elimination of fear, Afrophobia from white folks. I've met a lot of white folks who are actually, struggling with Afrophobia subconsciously. And what my, angle is saying, is saying we need to approach with a teaching mentality, right? With a teaching mentality where we say, we need to be able to engage other human beings and speak to them about our identity. This is who I am. This is how I want to be treated. This is how I want to be managed, not how you want to treat me. I love how, for example, you quoted Jomo Kenyatta. We cannot be ignorant, to, the difficult, we cannot be ignorant, to the difficult manipulation that came with colonialism. Jomo Kenyatta said the missionaries came with the Bible and they said, let us pray. We closed our eyes and began to pray. Oh, when we finished praying, we opened our eyes. They had the land, we had the Bible.
Everything was gone. Hallelujah.
And so we can't be naive. And I don't think we're a naive generation, but I think we ought to be a realistic generation. A generation that says, after hundreds of years of, leadership in South Africa, we are still underskilled. We are still underdeveloped. And partly, the problem is the global West, but also domestic leadership,
Yeah.
right? And so then I say, how can we then collaborate with nations like South Korea? Look at South Korea, almost 52 years ago, the country was obliterated, and
Yeah.
half of the population was completely gone, and the elderly were dead, and they were young
Yeah.
people. But what they did is they positioned themselves with the global community, and they opened free markets, and of course they promoted the Korean agenda. And 50 years later, South Korea is recognized as a first world country. Israel, we can argue whether you are, Palestine or for Israel. Israel is a startup nation. Let's look at how Israel positioned itself with the global world. And I think, as well as, instead of us sympathizing with the other, we ought to be, dominant and bold about how we want to be treated and how things should work from the ground up, no longer the top to bottom approach. So you see, African advocacy is not rejection of support, in my view. African advocacy is, emphatic discussion on the identity of African on African terms. This means we
I love
are
that. Come on, say that again, brother. Say that again, please. Say that again. Say that again.
this is
I
a
need you
random
to
thing. I have
repeat
to, I gotta go back now to the archive and draw it back, brother.
Say that again,
So-
brother. That's very
so-
important what you're saying.
So I really believe that African advocacy has to be an eye to eye type of level. How we should be treated, not how people should treat us the way they feel. How we want to be treated, right? And so we need to do away with passivism and actually deal with activism and say, no. We don't want, you don't treat me like that. And how
Yeah.
we do it is not on your terms, but it's on our terms.
Exactly.
Do you see what I mean?
Absolutely.
So this is to say we cannot completely reject. So I want your listeners and people who have followed us to listen to us here today, to know I am not saying we must sympathize with the West, the East, and the globe. This is not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is that we must not reject
Take
partnerships.
Yeah. Yeah.
Partnerships that are coming at a common ground. Africa must move from here to here.
Exactly.
We are not beggars
I love
of the
that.
world. We
I
are
love that.
partners with the world. And so if Asia comes at an eye to eye level, if India with 1.2 billion people comes at an eye to eye level, if China with 1 billion people comes at an eye to eye level, then we can be partners. But if they are
Yes.
coming and they're saying you are our slave, then we reject that at all costs.
And rebuke
And so
that.
I think this is the angle I'm coming from. And I'm thinking, that there is a global West that is willing to partner with us at an eye to eye level. There are many, fragments of individuals who are coming in with capital at a,
Yeah.
at an international level and saying, we're carrying capital, we're bringing skills, we would like to partner with you. And then it is our responsibility as young Africans then to then evaluate who those people are. And if Europe does not have those people, we fly to Europe, we begin to colonize Europe with African ideals.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
There's something here. What you say, it's really important. BJ is saying this. One of our families here in the family says, so Africa must build allegiance among each other. Standing alone, you're not strong to make any demands. And that's why our very first topic, it was about Africa's unity. That's what we are talking about, because what my brother you're talking about right now, Africa is very weak in that sense of negotiation, because I always say this, that we are on the table of asking and begging, instead to be on the table of demanding and actually making things happen. That, hey, all right, oh, you want to partner with us? Come. Okay, this is an opportunity. This is our percentage. That is for you. Okay, you want to take it? No, I don't want to take it. Okay, take it or leave it. Somebody else will come and will accept that, because no matter what, they need what we have. But right now we are on the table and negotiating and begging as if we really need your support. We cannot do this on our own. We need it. So they say, okay, I'll give you 12%. And the rest of it is us. And those are kind of contract that most of African countries have. And it's crazy that, today's leaders are trying to actually, take them down and renew all this contract. But it's the contract that our people are making. So if we come together, we are on the strong side of us demanding, of us wanting, of us writing our own narratives, our own stories, that, okay, this is how we should be treated. This is how it has to be. Come. If you don't want, leave. If you want, take it. Come, submit, and we go ahead. Because land is mine, resources is mine, people is mine. Anyone to give order, it doesn't work like that. This is my house. You gotta follow the rules of my house.
So I'm glad that I'm speaking this with someone, because I always see the the scaled farming projects that you are running in your country, and when you are advertising these, and the prestige costing that you put to that, and the excellence you are putting to the work that you are doing, it shows that you're an individual of excellence. And I think immediately once we open our mentality to say we're open to partnering with the world, but only at an eye to eye level, and then it's not our responsibility to teach Europe how to make us partners.
Oh yeah.
It's not it is their responsibility. And we need to be willing to reject some offers and advances
Exactly.
that are gonna
Absolutely.
enslave us again.
Hallelujah to
We
that.
need to learn how to walk out of rooms that are having big projects where we're worth nothing, at a bigger scale of things, And I think, and I think, we must look for those people who share our common values. I work with, friends of mine. They're not even South Africans, they're whites, they're Europeans, and we share those kind of values. And so I think we need to be open. But even, before we get to a conversation of saying the global community, the West, Asia, let's talk about ourselves. Why isn't Tanzania, doing business? Why are there no free markets? Why can't Tanzania come and invest in Kayelicha? You got to find
Exactly.
me, 50 Tanzanians, who have, those US dollars, idling. And if they make, between 5 million US dollars a year and above, let them come and invest in Kailicha. We will make sure that's what he sees with us. We will make sure we assist you to find the right people, we have the right stakeholders, we have the right political enabling, to come make sure that Tanzanians with money will thrive in South Africa. There is a market, and South Africans will work for them. Same applies. You say, Gama, do you have any South Africans there that are making between $5, $10 million? And can they come invest in South Africa? Because all of a sudden now we have to now say, if we cannot love others, if we cannot love ourselves. Do you see?
Yeah.
Because part of the problem is that there is such an entrenched self-undermine, Brother Shiva, that we underestimate you. We undermine you. I mean, you could speak to the president of Philippines, like I've seen you with the Malaysian delegation, like I've seen you do in your country. You could speak with the president of South Korea, like I've seen you do. But we still undermine you to do business with just Zimbabwe. We are Zimbabwe, but we don't want to do business with you. Here in some village in Libode, we don't want to do business with you in the Eastern Cape. And I think, we must start with ourselves. And I think this is the strength that Europe has, right? Let's look at Germany, for example. Germany resuscitated itself twice, brother. Before 1945, they had lost the battle, but by the time Hitler became, Führer of Germany, Germany had resuscitated itself. They shut down that guy Hitler, but after Hitler, Germany then became a world power. Do you see what I mean? And so I think Europe, then Germany supplies Europe, with finance, with skills, and so on. A small country was able to resuscitate itself, and so they take care of each other. And here we are, it's so difficult for me to just come on a plane and come to Tanzania. You're asking me a million questions, what have you brought? Blah, blah, blah. Guys, we must stop this thing, guys. Inter-Africa hate must die.
Yes.
And so I think it starts with us. It starts with us to say, before we ask Europe for anything, before we ask Asia for anything, let's strengthen those relations. Let's go to institutions of higher education and say, we want at least 10% of your top universities to actually come to historical Black universities and study here. Let's try to push an inter-Africa education, inter-Africa educational curriculum that will teach us one Africa history, where we can learn about your liberationists. It was so amazing when I read about President Museveni, highly criticized today, that he was young when he took over. He was young when he took over his predecessor. And the soldiers were young kids. It's so amazing, when I listen to, stories of liberation that come from our liberators, and these are the things that we want to learn. We don't want to learn about Vasco da Gama. There's no one guy who discovered a continent. You can't discover a place with people. I heard you when you were saying this caricature, this joke, this satire, saying one guy discovered. You cannot discover a place with people. It is unscientific and highly stupid. So no one ever says that. And so I think we need one Africa history. And here are two things that I'm opposed to, that are always in the public space among young people. Young people want to be Egyptians and they want to become Hebrews. Guys, young people must not try to be Egyptians or Arabs. If Morocco does not want to become part of Africa, thank you, Morocco. You can move to the, people are saying Middle East is the east of what? Who determined that UK was the middle of the world? There's a Middle East. Middle of what world? East of where? Do you understand what I mean? So the thoughts are wrong. We have to deconstruct that kind of thinking. We don't want to be Hebrews. We don't want to be Jews. We also don't want to be Egyptians. If they like the hieroglyphics and all the paintings, they can paint them blue. We are moving forward. We have an independent identity. We don't need to be part of historical ancient civilization, guys. We need to create a new civilization, an outer civilization that belongs in the period of now. We are not living now, and I think a lot of us, we were so, did we make the wheel? We don't need to have made anything, brothers. We don't need to have made everything. We must move forward, and we must love one another. Tanzanians are South Africans. I see you and I always listen to you, brother. You are a full-time Xhosa. I've never met a Xhosa like you
I love
in my
that,
whole
man.
life. Yeah, I always listen to you. I'm like, this guy, he's too much Xhosa, this guy. Even, the way you guys do things, your dance, some things that I like in Tanzania.
Yeah.
But you must have diplomatic immunity. Ne?
I appreciate it. Man, I'm live on TikTok as well. Let me talk to people here. They are asking a lot. So my people on TikTok, well, we're talking about Africa we want. For those who did not understand English, again, at the beginning, I said, I'm really sorry because I know there are a lot of Tanzanians there as well watching. Kwa hiyo tunaongelea kitu kinaitwa Afrika tunayohitaji. Ni Afrika gani tunataka? Kwa tunaongelea kuhusu umoja wa Afrika, tunaongelea kuhusu hata maswala mbalimbali ya sisi kama Waafrika na kushirikiana na mataifa mengine nje ya Afrika, kwamba sisi lazima tuwe ni watu ambao tuna determine, yani sisi ndio tupo kwenye ile sisi tunasema kwamba hichi na hichi tunataka, hichi hatutaki, ila tusio kwenye sisi ya kupokea tu kila kitu ambacho anatupa. Umeona? Kwa hiyo kama mikataba inakuja kwetu nchini kwetu ili kwamba tuweze kuendelea na kufanya kila kitu, lazima sisi ndio tuwe tuna say katika ile mikataba. Tuwe tunasema kwamba tunataka hichi hatutaki, hichi nataka hichi. Kwa hiyo kuna mambo mengi sana naongelea kiujumla kuhusu Afrika, the Africa we want. And this session on Monday, hii session kila siku Monday huwa tunatumia Kiingereza, One Africa Podcast, lakini kuna session mbalimbali ambazo natumia Kiswahili. Ukienda kwenye YouTube yetu ya channel Swahili Nation, utaona kuna kitu kinaitwa Swahili Nation Podcast. Hiyo ni Kiswahili tu. Tumeshashusha episode nyingi 4, na episode nyingine inakuja hii Jumatano, nadhani ni Jumatano inayokuja au Alhamisi inakuja, na episode nyingi tumeshashoot zaidi ya 4-5 tayari zimeshashutiwa, zote zinakuja za Kiswahili. Nenda YouTube Swahili Nation utaiona pale, na hapa pia taongea kwa Kiswahili, taongea kwa Kiingereza pia wakati mwingine, lakini kwa sasa hivi kwa sababu mgeni wangu hapa anatokea South Africa, ni mtu anatokea Xhosa, tunaongea kwa
Yes,
Kiingereza.
perfect, brother. I apologize to our viewers who are outer African who abendinothethi Xhosa, guys. Ndiyaxolisa.
You know what, my brother?
Ndizoyifundi Swahili.
I would love to teach you Swahili, man. We gotta learn all this language, man. We gotta learn all this.
I'm currently learning a little bit of Swahili, so by myself. So I would appreciate if you would teach me, because I'm gonna teach you isiXhosa.
Brother, officially, I'm your Swahili teacher. All right, and I know South Africa right now they're learning Swahili in school. And when I was in Korea, very interesting thing: the ambassador of South Africa to South Korea, she was taking my Swahili class. Like I was a teacher. I was Swahili teacher at the Tanzanian embassy in South Korea. Guys, yanasema nilikuwa ni mwalimu wa Kiswahili kwenye ubalozi wa South Africa Korea. Kwa hiyo ambassador wa South Africa alikuwa anasoma Kiswahili na mimi ndiye niliyekuwa namfundisha wakanipo South Korea. So yeah, so she was actually my student, and it was pretty fun, to teach ambassador Swahili, because you are an ambassador, but right now I'm your teacher. All right.
Exactly. Thank you so much.
It was really good, man. To just
I'm super excited. And it's precisely because of that I say then we ought to develop a One Africa curriculum, right? What Africa needs, it needs, a continental university where the best in the continent are aggregated into one institution from every sector of life, and we have one institution, and we choose a place where the university is going to be, right? And then all of a sudden we take the best in every university from every country,
Yeah.
including the diaspora, because
Mm.
Africa is 55 countries, right? And then we
Oh yeah.
take the best and then we
Mm.
put them into that university. They do
Mm.
innovation, they do
Mm.
language and creativity, they do
Mm.
science and development,
Mm.
and so on and so forth, right? And I think, there's such a high affinity,
Mm.
for a single Africa curriculum. And all of a sudden, then we teach all of the information in Swahili. So
Mm.
for you to make it to this university, you don't have
Mm.
to be financially, the top, but also you have to be, probably high in athleticism. You have to
Mm.
be a
Mm.
community changer, so there are many qualities that will bring you in.
Mm.
Maybe we deconstruct political thinking for a while and start
Yeah.
building institutions, and,
Yeah.
and, and, and
Yeah.
no nation can be a success without developing
Mm.
institutions. And
Mm.
institutions, we need one Africa,
Mm.
university where we can
Mm.
develop curricula, where we can develop and substantiate and drive our
Yeah.
own educational agendas.
Yeah.
Look at this history notion, brother, that we're talking about. You don't even, we don't even know who, our chiefs and our kings were opposing colonialism. We
Yeah.
don't hear about the Makomas, we don't hear about the Ngrikas, we don't hear about those people, because they don't promote the agenda of the West. They take a selected few, that will promote that agenda. And so you cannot promote independent dominance and pride
Mm.
to say I
Mm.
am who I am. And I know it at a South African context. I'm a rural guy, brother. By
Mm.
the way, I forgot to tell you guys, I'm from the
Mm.
rural areas. I'm as rural as they come,
Come
right?
on, girl.
And and I always
I
meet
love-
other South Africans, they have
Mm.
less identity than me.
Mm.
And
Mm. Mm.
and someone would argue, come, what do you mean less identity? They're not confident. That's what I mean. We
Mm.
can't, intersectionalize this issue. They are not
Yeah.
confident about being black. They're not confident about being Xhosa.
Mm.
You find, they're conformists. They change their language, they plait their hair, they do all manner of things to try to fit in and
Mm.
serve global interests.
Mm.
Why? Because they don't know who they are.
Yeah.
They don't know who they are. And I think, if we teach people an identity, we give people history, we tell them who they were, we
Mm.
tell them who were the people who fought, even if the ones they were killed and they lost, but we
Mm.
just tell them that Makoma refused,
Yeah.
that the Xhosas be dominated. I come
Mm.
from a lineage of guys who were fighting, and who
Mm.
were resisting colonialism, and it did not go through until it came
Yeah.
through peaceful ways. And
Yeah.
so I think, it was peace that dominated us, by the way, at the local level, not war.
Mm. Mm. Mm.
We
Mm.
could not
Mm.
lose the war, and so, but that's a topic of another day, brother. So
Absolutely.
I don't know. I don't know, brother. I don't know, but I'm super
Absolutely.
excited.
What you're saying is, 100%. Let me just say for my people who are watching here on TikTok as well, guys, kwa wale ambao tena hawaelewi Kiingereza, nitazungumza. Kuna mtu ameuliza hapo, kwa nini sizungumzi tena swala la bandari? Mbona tunazungumza sana? Hata ukienda YouTube utaona video mpya tumetoa leo, mimi nikiwa na wenzangu wawili tunazungumzia swala hilo la bandari. Unaweza ukaenda ukaangalia, lakini pia nikimaliza hii conversation hapa on TikTok nitaongelea kidogo swala hilo la bandari, na nitaongelea mawazo yangu ni yapi, ni kipi ambacho tunafikiria, nanyi pia mnaweza mkashare kidogo, alafu nitakuwa namaliza kwa hilo. Kwa hiyo naomba mniwie radhi, mnipe dakika chache tu nimalize hii session na my brother hapa kutoka South Africa, alafu tutaendelea kidogo kuongelea hilo. My brother, let me say this, man. Me and you, we wanted to do this for a long time, and the matter of fact, we wanted to do it since last week, but for some reason it didn't happen. And for me, I'm kind of man that I always just go with the flow, as God lead, as the Spirit lead. And I think this was the perfect time for us to have this conversation, because what I want to do it with you, my brother, I'm going to tell you this right now, Gamma Cuba, that I don't want to have just this one session. I want to have with you regular sessions. And if it is possible, I want us even to name it like it's One Africa podcast, but it's Mika and Gamma. Maybe we can name it something that we constantly just talk about that, because we need this passion that we have. We need this knowledge that you have, that I have, to bring our people together and to see about change. So that's my propose to you. And if you're up to that, we can do this even every single week if you want. We can just choose a day and just do those days. Like that day, Mika and Gamma is there. Mika and Gamma is there. Just overtaking this Africa, by the storm. All right.
Look, I'm super excited about joining this online podcast with you.
Yeah.
By the way, I have no social media. In case people were checking, I have no Facebook, I have no Instagram, I
This
have no
guy.
LinkedIn. I only have WhatsApp and one YouTube video somewhere, that was opened by someone on my behalf in my
Yeah.
ministry days. So my earlier success was ministry.
Mm,
I planted an international Nigerian church,
mm,
super successful, charismatic, and prophetic
mm,
ministry. And,
mm, mm,
it did very well. And I really felt God was calling me for the public space. And I
yeah.
was part of the founding, members from
Mm,
the youth point of view of a movement that
yeah.
was called One South Africa that promotes electoral reform in South Africa. And I
Yeah.
believe that a nation that is morally bankrupt is going to soon be financially bankrupt. And so
Absolutely.
South Africa is morally bankrupt.
Mm,
It has lost liberation leaders like the Albert
yeah.
Lutulis, who were
Mm,
reverends. The
mm,
Enoch Sontongas or Nkosi Sikelela, who were
mm,
reverends. The
mm,
Oliver Tambos, who came from the church as evangelists, including the Mandelas. And,
yeah.
South Africa is led by so-called, leaders, who have no
Yeah.
calling and no objective. And so I'm super excited leading with
Yeah.
you. I'm super excited sharing this podcast with you and also meeting with, bringing a guy like Mongare into the conversation. You'd
Absolutely.
be
Absolutely.
shocked. He's a
Ab-
young,
yeah.
public figure in Kenya,
Yeah.
Nathaniel Mongare. He was
Yeah.
the speaker of,
Yeah.
he was the spokesperson for the Amani National Congress, which
Yeah.
has now become part of, the Kenya Kwanza coalition. And
Yeah.
he's a believer. He's exactly like you. I can't believe it.
We,
You know,
let me tell you this, man. For the next conversation that we're going to have, maybe next week, whenever you want, we need to include this guy. We need to come
we,
here, three
we,
of us, because
we
we
better
spoke
bring
about
that
this
up.
before. Yeah, we need to have this conversation together. So please, talk to him, man. Talk to this
Yeah,
man. And
he's in
I
the
mean,
office of the prime minister. So if he's not busy doing important things, we will try to drag him here. You and him are very important people, unlike us.
listen, brother, we are going to bring him here. We're gonna be like, hey, man, you're working for the people, and we the people. So come on, we're
Yeah,
working for Africa here, all right? So we're gonna work for
awesome.
Africa together.
Awesome.
Exactly.
No, so definitely you have my commitment. Let's set up a schedule, and I'm super excited doing this, even if it's once a
Appreciate
week, brother. And
appreciate
let's continue to redefine and look. I think if
Yeah.
there's any submission that you could say came from my side,
Yeah.
it's advocacy for humanizing the world, not the
Yeah.
West, but the
Yeah.
world. And
Yeah.
I say it is Africa's turn to teach the world,
Mm.
not mechanics, not
Yeah.
technology,
Yeah.
but teaching them how to be, an African. And
Yeah.
Africanizing the world is our responsibility. Africa is no
Yeah.
longer coming to the world as a learner, but is coming as a teacher. We've
Absolutely.
been around long enough. The world is, you'll forgive my little bit profanity. The world is fucked up because the world has
Mm.
been the only one that's teaching.
Mm.
Teaching
Mm.
cannot go one way. Teaching
Yeah.
must be both ways. It's our
Exactly.
turn to teach the world. And when we
Absolutely.
enter into the room,
Mm.
and I want to say we must be open in innovating heritage and custom and culture
Mm.
to
Mm.
seeing Africa, beyond being South African, but
Mm.
also, being African at large. That is our continent. We have
Mm.
our outer African brothers that we have to reintegrate into the African system, the African
Mm.
Americans, and
Mm.
so we have to ask our fundamental questions. Are these
Mm.
brothers African? And
Mm.
what does it mean for them to be African? Does African
Yeah.
mean being black?
Yeah.
And so then all of a sudden we have the Europeans who were born in Africa who
Mm.
subscribe to our customs, our heritage, and our values, and who are
Mm.
fighting those who are fighting for common interests as us. How
Yeah.
can we innovate culture to also accept and be subservient to the humanity that they bring to
Mm.
the table? Because I
Mm.
want to believe that there is no group of, Homo sapiens that has a
Yeah.
monopoly on what it means to be human. And I want
Yeah.
to submit that nation building is not independent of faith communities, that faith
Mm.
communities have a permanent seat at the table because they
Mm.
own the values of the people, they own our aspirations, they own
Yeah.
our assumptions, they own our views, and they frame our worldviews. And so,
Mm.
with that said, I say we must give interfaith communities dialogue as well as a seat at the global governance table.
Mm.
Not one monopolized institution, but all
Mm.
of them to say
Mm.
at a human level, at our core, God's
Yeah.
need is for us to guide people with love And what is that love? And we agree that that love is not uncontrolled liberty, but human managed over the interests and the affairs of human beings.
Yeah.
And furthermore, I think, from a commercial point of view, we need to start by educating our population.
Yeah.
We need Africans that are convicted and dominant about their roots, that are
Yeah.
bold for being black, bold for being rural,
Yeah.
who are not driven by success, material wealth, which is important, but are driven by, saying, if I make it, we all make it. Are
Yes.
driven by saying, I have to make it so that I can build schools in my village, build universities, build hospitals. We need Africans who can do it, like Julius Mvale. There's a Kenyan by the name of Julius Mvale who invented the biometric in America during the 9/11 period. And he came and he came to Hillary with this issue. And today he's a billionaire. He owns the Hamptons of Kenya. It's called Mvale City. And he's an African billionaire, And I think we need more of those. And I think Africa needs to, create regulated red carpets. And when I mean regulated, we need to audit African values.
Yeah.
And we must partner with the world. We must partner with South Korea, brother. Only if Korea is willing to learn Swahili.
Yeah.
Korea
Yeah.
mustn't come with a colonial agenda of saying you must learn Korean here. If they want to partner with us, they must learn Swahili.
Absolutely.
And as well as we will teach their children Swahili, then we will learn Korean. This thing we're learning Chinese in Africa, and the Chinese are not learning one African language. That nonsense must stop. We learn the language of countries that learn our languages.
Yes, exactly.
And so,
That's beautiful,
if they want land in Africa, we want land in Korea as well.
Mm.
And so we must partner at an eye to eye level. And I think, we are super excited about partnering with the global community. And, we must respect ourselves. And once we respect ourselves, other people will know how to respect us. It will be in their homes that they will question, should I say this to this guy? Should I say this to these people? And so, and I think One Africa then does not start with the global community. It starts with our domestic interests. One passport, one university, and so on. One military, we must go on,
One
and
currency.
once we do the basics, we can be able, the best of our country must go to this one university, and the one university will not start when we have One Africa political party. It must start now.
Yeah.
It must start now. We must choose a plot of land here in Africa. I will donate land from the Eastern Cape. Our family has land. I will donate land. We must build a university,
Come on,
an
that's the
African
spirit.
university in the homeland of Madiba, One Africa university in the Eastern Cape. And then we bring the best of Tanzania, the best of Nigeria, the best of, and I want to emphasize this. We cannot entertain, internalized African xenophobia, tribalism, and racism. We must call out countries like Morocco, countries like Egypt. If Egyptians don't want to be Africans, it's not a problem. We don't need them in Africa.
Yeah.
They can stick and become part of the Mediterranean there in the north. If the Moroccans, because we are always, scolding Europeans for racism, and we overlook Arab racism, guys. We must not play with them at all. We must hit internal racism that is in African tribalism as hard as we can.
Yeah.
Look at what's happening in South Sudan. Everyone is talking about Russia and Ukraine. We don't care about Russia and Ukraine, guys. People are dying in North and South Sudan now. The war in Ethiopia, the invasions that are happening in Africa. We're grateful for, media rooms like yours, brother, who are reporting about the vilifying atrocities that are occurring internally. If Putin wants, he can annex, my brother, Ukraine. We have issues here inside of Africa. This is not our business, my brother. People wanted to call it a global war. This is not World War III. It's a European conflict. Here in South Africa, we can decide that we want Lesotho tomorrow. Lesotho is one country inside of our country. We are going to take Lesotho, So it's not anyone's business, my brother. Our personal sovereignty as a continent starts with, us having one media podcast like these that are discussing domestic issues, and to those who are, sympathizing, my extremism is not lack of sympathy for Europe and what is happening in Ukraine and Russia. What I'm trying to emphasize and stress is that there's a necessity for us to mind our own business. We have our own problems here. With issues, North Sudan, South Sudan, people are dying there. Northern Nigeria, with Islamization and Christianization in Nigeria, how Nigeria is split between two religions.
Yeah.
You see, so I say kill classism, kill religious conflicts, and
Yeah.
Africa will thrive, brothers. And so I say we need to look beyond religious lines, and I think we
Yeah.
need to look beyond tribal lines. We need to start loving each other. We need to have inter-universal, exchange programs to introduce each other to each other. We mustn't meet Tanzanians when they start a business in South Africa. We must meet them in university. The rich Tanzanians must come to South Africa. The rich
Yeah.
South Africans must go to Tanzania. And I
Absolutely.
think, it doesn't start at a political level, it starts at a personal
Yeah.
level. Look at Europeans, brother. They like traveling to Sweden, they like traveling to Italy. These guys don't wait for the EU. They do it just to visit. And so we think with the departments of tourism at a continental level, it must be cheap to travel to Tanzania, my brother. It
Yeah.
mustn't be
Yeah.
cheap to travel to Europe and expensive to travel to Tanzania. This is absurd, brother. So it's systemic and institutional by nature. The blockade to promote the Berlin, carving of Africa. And so I want to say, we must oppose that. We must come together from a tourism point of view and oppose these exorbitant fees for us to travel, in between us as countries. And so we must have educational exchange programs. We must promote those now. And I think already from this podcast, we may have already an execution point to say we want a One Africa University. This could be a submission. If you start, I know from your channel, you have close to 500,000 people. If you start today a petition that says we want a One Africa University and we will donate land in the Eastern Cape, and we take it to the AU.
I take it
We
already.
say,
It's there.
yeah, let's
Yeah.
take it. One Africa
Let's do it.
University, let's take
One
it.
Africa
I know you
University.
empowered. Let's
Let's
do it.
raise leaders there. Come on, it's done. It's done.
Exactly.
It's done. Come
Because
on. It has our name in it. Let's do it. One Africa University. I'm done.
exactly.
Oh,
And then with
yeah,
all
yeah,
of the world,
listen to this. Listen to this. Here itakuwa OAU.
OAU,
OAU.
OAU,
One
One
Africa
Africa
University.
University.
Come on now.
And so we started it here. So if we start a petition from today
love
is a Monday, by Friday, let's have a petition running. We take all our celebrity friends and we promote a One Africa University. This is
Let's
an
do it.
action item. This is a call to action so that
Let's
we
do
can
it.
continue to meet. And I can tell you with my political contacts, here in South Africa, we have major role players. We will drive, we will get the land, we will get the approvals. If the government does not give us land, we will use our own cultural land. We don't need the government. This is why we promote free markets. We're business people. Because if the government doesn't want, we'll do it by ourselves. And we're fortunate enough that we have buy-in, we have community buy-in. And I invite the rest of Africa to come. Let's have university, the best lecturers in Africa. They come to the university in South Africa.
Now Lumumba
And
will
so-
come there to give some lectures. Let's do this, man,
Yes.
as soon as let's do this as soon as possible. Let's write that petition, all right? Let's write that petition and let's start talk about it. We're gonna tag
We will
African
task
youth
people to
to
start
send
doing it
letters
now.
to them, and we need One Africa
By
University.
the time I become president of South Africa and you are president of Africa, we would have had at least 20 years of an of One Africa University, OAU.
You. Hey, I love that, man. I love that. Let's finish with that note for today. But man, next week we're coming back here to have another conversation, and we can talk even more about One Africa University. Me and you will still having the private talks about it to develop this idea. And you guys who are watching, if you have any idea, if you have any suggestion to that, don't hesitate to hit us up in this email. I'm gonna develop with my brother this idea that we have here right now. Send me the email. I just send at mikachaval@yahoo.com or oneafricaofficial at gmail.com. Send it there, and we're gonna have an amazing. Oh, you can even send in our WhatsApp group. We have my brother. I'm gonna invite you in One Africa Foundation, group. I want you to be part of that, both international and also the general one, because we have
We're
two of
super
them.
excited.
Yeah, brother, I love you. Thank you for being here. This is the beginning of the conversation that we're gonna have next week. Let's talk to that guy from Kenya. Bring him on. You can send a
Next
message in
week.
our group. Exactly. Send them in our group, and we can decide with him next week what time we're gonna come here, and we'll start
Awesome.
preparing that, ready to talk for One Africa University. All right.
Tata ndiyabulela kakhulu, siyabulela mawethu. Mna ndingudlamini uJama uSithathu Fakade eVichtsville eMthatha. Ndiyabulela. Thank you so much. Uqamata nisikelele madoda. Makuse.
It's like
Makukhanye.
it's like you're singing a song, man. Let me give you an honor, man, to pray, because at the end I always thank God after this session.
Yes,
You
please.
lead us into prayer, man.
Thank you. Father, we give you praise for this moment, and we thank you that you are uniting the hearts of men, Spirit of God, and that you're speaking to us and you're building an Africa that is morally founded on the right values and the right principles of Isintu, that we regard our humanity beyond our tribes, that we regard our humanity beyond our social classes, that we regard our humanity beyond our backgrounds. Father, we thank you that we're moving forward. And we're so grateful and we're super excited for the new projects that are coming. We're super excited about the One Africa University idea that you dropped now in this meeting. We don't know how it's going to come, but we know that we're going to make it happen. We thank you that we are bringing people to join us to build this. And we're super excited. In Jesus' name. Amen and amen. Woo!
Man, man, I love that. I love that. Thank you, brother. That's
Brother,
it.
thank you for the invitation. I'm super excited. I'm super excited about the One Africa University. Let's
I'm
take
super
it as a petition to the
Yeah.
chair of the Africa Union.
Yeah, let's do it. Let's do it, brother. Me and you will have conversation. We can start, preparing that petition, and yeah, and let's do this. All right.
Awesome.
I love you, brother. See you.
Kosita, love from my
I
side.
appreciate it. I appreciate it. Bye. Guys, thank you so much. My brother, he already prayed here to thank God. So I'm just gonna end this session on YouTube and continue on TikTok because I need to share some stuff with my people here. Thank you so much, Nana Dreams. I want to appreciate you for your, super chat for the donation. I appreciate. I thank you, and I love you. Thank you, and it makes all sense because I know you now. Appreciate the family being here. BJ, Marit, Reggie. I love you guys. Marit, happy anniversary. Now today is 25 years wedding anniversary. Man, I don't even have one day of my wedding, my marriage. All right. So keep praying for us young people because these days a lot of marriage are breaking up just like like I don't know. Yeah. Okay. 25 years, that's a huge milestone. So I applaud you for staying with your hobby for that long. Yeah, it takes a lot of discipline, a lot of maturity, and grace of God as well to stay that long. So bless you, and we celebrate you and your family. My regards to your beautiful husbands and kids. Husband and kids. I made a mistake. I said husbands. I'm sorry, Marit. Happy anniversary, our sister. Yeah, Sherry, good to see you guys. I love you so much. And I'll see you guys next time. This day will be just popping up anytime to talk about this stuff. All right. It's a time to unite our Africa again. All right. And we're going to do it.